In our last episode, we helped the Mariner fortify the hull of Far Harbor, and we traveled to Red Death Island to confront a monstrous creature responsible for killing so many sailors and traders who dared to sail the seas near Far Harbor. But we've only explored about half of the town of Far Harbor. Moving towards the middle of the dock, we find the communal kitchen and dining area where Teddy threw the party after we completed the captain's dance. Here we find a big stew pot with a whole Mirelurk cooking in it. Looks tasty. Northwest of here, we find a cooking stove that we can use to grill up all of the wonderful meat we've accumulated so far. This cooking stove is right next to the last plank, where we will eventually need to go to find this old Longfellow, the guide to Acadia, whom Avery told us about. But first, if we turn right and move around the last plank, we find a woman sitting in a lawn chair by a table bathed in light from a lantern. This is Cassie Dalton.
Hi. You're that mainlander who just got here. Better watch yourself, 'cause this island sees and hears everything you do. I should know. I watched the island tear down the greatest family that ever set foot in Far Harbor. It's a tale of greed, blood, and vengeance.
Sorry, but I'm not real big on stories.
You must not be big on earning caps either, 'cause I was about to offer you a job. Oh well, too bad for you.
You think the island is alive? You're completely crazy.
Oh, you think that now, but by the time you've heard my tale, you might not be so sure.
What family are you talking about?
I was just about to explain.
Sounds interesting. I'd like to hear it.
I thought you might say that. My family, the Daltons, was the pride of Far Harbor for generations, even back before the war. It was lumber and fishing that made the Daltons rich. But they got greedy, took too much from the island. The island's been getting revenge ever since, killing us off one by one. I'm the last Dalton still standing. But now our story takes an unexpected turn. A mysterious stranger comes to Far Harbor. Someone strong, someone capable. With the stranger's help, the last living Dalton finally has a chance to avenge her bloodline once and for all.
Let me guess. I'm the mysterious stranger who's gonna help you avenge your family.
You're a quick one. Good. You'll need your wits about you, because your part in the story is filled with danger.
I get it. I'm the stranger and you need my help. Fine, but you better make this worth my time.
Don't worry about that. One thing a Dalton's never been is poor.
Cut the bullshit and just tell me what you need.
Sounds like someone forgot to pack a sense of adventure when they got on the boat to Far Harbor. Now, on to the first chapter in our tale of vengeance. That would be the sad story of freckle-faced Petey. Petey was my cousin. He was a good lad, never caused trouble. He thought all those freckles brought him luck, but, well, not so much. He was out foraging at the National Park Campground when the island sicked some feral ghouls on him. Island's a sneaky bastard when it wants to be. Anyway, he made it back to town, but died from his injuries that night. Of course, those ferals are still out there, waiting to kill the next poor fool who comes along. Damn shame that.
Where'd you say these ghouls were?
National Park Campground. It's pretty much straight west of here.
Go deal with them yourself.
Haven't you been listening to anything I've said? I'm a Dalton. The island knows me. It's just waiting for me to set foot outside that gate. But you're new here. It'll never see you coming.
I'm not promising anything, but I'll think about it.
You want to take your time thinking about it? Fine. Just tell me when it's done.
Those ghouls are as good as dead.
Good, good. It's long past time those shamblers paid for what they did to Petey.
Okay, well, what an eccentric lady. Poor old freckled-faced Petey was just out foraging. Well, I think we have what it takes to avenge him. To find this national park campground, we indeed have to walk pretty much due west of here. Well, west and slightly south. We find it just outside the ruins of Greater Far Harbor. Upon arrival, we do indeed find some feral ghouls.
Nasty cannibals. Don't even break a sweat. Not that it's an option.
But it wasn't quite the horde of ghouls Cassie Dalton led us to believe. In fact, we find a number of ghoul bodies already here. Looks like freckle-faced Petey may have taken a few out before he crawled back to Far Harbor. The campground is not very big. We don't find much here. There's a cap stash on a crate, a first aid kit in an outhouse, a wooden crate hiding behind some others, and just outside the shacks, we find an actual campground. Here we find 2 tents we can use to sleep in if we want to. There's an explosives box with explosives inside, and 1 tent that's been ruined. Nearby, we find the skeleton of a woman. Looks like she and her tent were savaged by creatures from the island. When done, we can head back to Far Harbor to let Cassie know that her cousin has been avenged.
I wiped out the feral ghouls at the campground.
The hero of our saga returns triumphant. I bet the island didn't see that coming. It's only right you get paid for your troubles. Here's 200 caps for you.
Come on, that's barely pocket change.
Well, the real treasure's waiting for you at the end of the story. But we haven't got to that yet.
I wasn't looking to get paid. I'm just happy to help you out.
You're a good person. I can see that.
I think I deserve more than that.
I suppose I could part with a little more. Here's another 100 caps.
So, who else needs to be avenged?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I've been thinking about what's next, and then it came to me. We all love our grandparents, don't we? Kind, gentle, doting, love to spoil you. You'd never want something awful to happen to them. Nobody would. That's why it broke my heart when I lost Grandpa George.
We've all lost someone. You deal with it, and you move on. That's life.
Well, we all haven't lost someone like Grandpa George, I can promise you that. A kinder and braver man has never walked these streets. I still remember the day I heard the news about what happened to him.
Sorry. You must have been very fond of him.
Everybody was. But that didn't matter to the island. Oh, no. He was cursed the moment he was born a Dalton.
What happened to him?
He had a farm, little ways north of here. Lived a peaceful life, working the land and not causing anyone trouble. The island sent something after him. A huge monster, mean as spit and with claws to snap steel beams. A fog crawler. Grandpa bravely stood his ground, a shotgun in his hands, holding off that terror while the farmhands fled back here. If you can take out that shell-backed devil, it'll send a message loud and clear that says the Daltons never forget when they've been wronged.
This is nonsense. The island isn't out to get you. It's just earth and rock.
Ha! That's the same mistake everyone makes. It lulls you into a false sense of security, and just when you let your guard down, bam! It strikes. Well, I ain't fooled.
You're not really expecting me to avenge every single family member you've ever lost, are you?
No, only the ones the island killed. Some others died when their boat sank, but we can't exactly get revenge on the ocean, now can we? That's just crazy.
Where can I find this farm?
Follow the coastline to the north.
That fog crawler's gonna pay. For Grandpa George.
That's the spirit. Off you go then. The story's unfinished, and there's another chapter still to write.
Well, according to Cassie Dalton, the island is alive and filled with hatred. But personifying the ocean? Well, that would be crazy. Cassie here sure has a knack for turning a simple task into a long-winded story. At any rate, at least we have some context. Sounds like Grandpa George really was a hero. He stayed behind to fight the fog crawler, allowing all of his farm hands to escape. Well, like the Soul Survivor said, let's do this for Grandpa George. Cassie sends us to Dalton Farm, which we do find by traveling the coast west of Far Harbor. Upon arrival, we find a number of ruined buildings, and in front of the homestead by the docks, we find an enraged fog crawler. Oh, and he just soaks up ammunition. Pain Train doesn't seem to work on it. But then he kind of dives into the water and sits there for a bit. Looks like we can't shoot through the water. Come on, get out of there. Well, he's just gonna sit there, isn't he? Well, his head peeks up just a bit. If I focus on his head, maybe... Come on, Nick, a little help here.
Underestimate us again.
All right, well, thanks for that, Nick. A little late on the toss there. Well, those fog crawlers sure are nasty. Hope we don't meet many more of those. Nearby on the dock, we find a workshop in a shed, but we can't activate it. Exploring the homestead, which at one time may have been a shop, we don't have time to loot anything. Whew, close call. But there's not much here, and there's nothing in the other ruin as well. So heading back to Cassie Dalton, we can tell her that Grandpa George has been avenged.
Grandpa George can rest in peace. The fog crawler is dead.
Wonderful. That's another chapter successfully concluded. You truly are the heroic Avenger I hoped you were. With that fog crawler gone, we can send some folks up there to get the place ready for you. That's right. The farm is yours. Your own little piece of the island. It'll take work to get it up and running again, but you'll have help. And here's another 200 caps in gratitude for your service to the great Dalton lineage.
With that, we unlock Dalton Farm as a settlement, and when we return, we can activate the workshop. True to her word, Cassie Dalton does send some people to help us establish a settlement. Perhaps these are the farmhands that the fog crawler had chased away so many years before. I built this up into a beautiful little settlement, which I showed off in a video that you can watch here. But back at Cassie Dalton, the Soul Survivor has some choice words over the amount of money Cassie gave us.
I'll try not to feel insulted by such a small amount.
Well, I got something special in store that'll make it all worthwhile. I promise.
Surely a heroic Avenger deserves more than 200 caps.
I can agree to that. Here's another 100 caps.
Really, it's no trouble.
Well, I hope you know how much it means to me that Grandpa George can finally rest in peace.
Who else needs to be avenged?
I was just about to explain. No, I don't have to tell you that the bonds of blood and family are strong. As strong as any a person can know. But if you ask me, the strongest among them is the bond that exists between two married people. That's why the last part of this tale is the hardest one for me to tell.
Don't expect me to feel sorry for you. I had to watch, helplessly, while my husband was murdered.
I see. I've opened an old wound. I'll just get on with the story then.
Believe me, I know exactly how you feel.
If that's true, then I'm sorry to hear it. Perhaps we'll confront our pain together.
I take it this is the next chapter of the story.
It's the final chapter, in fact.
You were married. What happened?
My late husband, Daniel, was the best fisherman this island ever saw. He and his crew had a favorite fishing spot out by Brookes Head Lighthouse. One day, a day I'll never forget, I see Danny's boat pulling up with his crewmen all shouting and carrying on. Turns out some trappers moved into the lighthouse. No doubt because the island told them to. They're all crazier than a bag of mole rats. Their leader was having a little target practice. Shot Danny right between the eyes. Killed him, just like that. You go and get that son of a bitch. You make him pay for doing the island's bidding.
Wait, did you just call someone else crazy? That is priceless.
What? I don't get your meaning. Ugh, never mind that.
Fine. But after this, I want payment and then I'm done.
Of course, of course. This is the end, the final chapter. Once you've done this, the last Dalton will be avenged.
How do I get to the Brookes Head Lighthouse?
It's southwest of town, not far from the quarry.
I'll make that trapper pay.
All right then. Remember, trappers may be half crazy from the fog, but they still know how to use a gun.
So these trappers murdered Daniel, Cassie's husband. The sole survivor knows what it's like to lose a husband. Cassie may be as mad as a hatter, but we can help her out with a little bit of vengeance. If not for Daniel, then maybe for Nate. Brookes Head Lighthouse is pretty far away. It's on the southernmost tip of the island, the farthest south we can possibly go. Along the way, we find a number of ruins, houses partially sunken into the ocean, homes the island is trying to reclaim. In one such ruin, we find the corpse of a synth refugee leaning against a wall. And in a duffel bag at the foot of the bed, we find a scrawled journal, along with a tidy stash of caps and ammunition. Reading the journal, it was a mistake ever coming here. We'd heard that there was a colony of our kind and came over from the mainland. But there's something wrong about this place. I can hear the creatures out there in the fog. We're going to make it till... But the note is ripped, and we can't read the rest. Lying on the other side of the bed is a decapitated synth refugee. Something killed them in the night while they were sleeping in their sleeping bags. If this is the fate of two synth refugees who came to the island looking for Acadia, could this be the same fate that Kasumi suffered? We need to wrap things up here in Far Harbor to see if Kasumi ever made it to this Acadia. Near to the desk, we find a wall-mounted safe, locked with an advanced lock. We can walk away with a tidy stash of ammunition, and heading upstairs, we see that it's blocked off with crates, but here we find an ammo box. Near to this ruin, we find a shipping crate with another ammo box inside. I then stumbled upon another ruin. This one has a teddy bear that tried to make a run for it. He was using a wooden door as a raft and brought some dirty water and a can of beans. Near to this is a wooden crate lying on the remains of a floor. Upstairs, we find two skeletons still lying in bed, clutching each other for comfort as they embraced their fate. Behind their bed, we find a duffel bag. And a short walk later, we arrive at the Brookes Head Lighthouse. The trappers had built a wall all around it. And at last, we can exact some revenge. We've cleared the manor just outside the lighthouse, but I have a feeling we'll find more trappers as we explore. The manor is an absolute ruin. Most of the walls have been knocked out. We find a number of goodies that the trappers have left out for us. There's a table just outside with 308 ammunition and an ammo box. On top of the scrap wall, we find a container filled with jet.
Sure made a mess of this place, didn't they?
Back inside, we see they were eating Mirelurk cakes at the dining table. Opening a curio cabinet nearby, we find some mentats, and next to it, an ammo box filled with ammunition. There's a workshop just outside, under the shadow of the lighthouse. Opening the front door, inside we find a power armor frame. No power armor or fusion core on it, however, though there is a power armor workbench and a weapons workbench here. Back in the manor, we find scrap curiously on display in a variety of display cases, and in the laundry room they had a bunch of meat that they were hacking up, getting ready to cook. Moving upstairs, we find another huge floor to explore. In one room, we find an ammo box by a sandbag barricade. And on the headboard of the bed, we find some blocks that curiously spell the word Scotch. All right, well, if I ever move in, I'll take this room. In another bedroom, we find a first aid kit on another bed headboard. By the stairs under a curio cabinet, we find another ammo box. And in a tiny little bathroom next to a staircase, we find a novice-locked first aid kit on the wall above the toilet. After looting some bobby pins in the sink, we can take the next staircase up to the attic level. Here we find a chemistry station, where the trappers were making up some chems. There's a tiny bed by a window, where we find a footlocker at the end of it. And moving to another small bedroom, we find an ammo box, beneath a mounted Mirelurk claw, and a duffel bag filled with pre-war money under the bed. Then, if we look to the northwest, we see the trappers have built a stair leading to a platform out the roof of the attic. If we follow it to the very top of the roof and examine the easternmost steeple, we find a bottle of Vim Captain's Blend delicately placed at the top of the steeple. We can add this to our collection. After fully exploring the manor, we find a door to the lighthouse to the south. The floor of the lighthouse is covered in flammable fluid. Have to be careful. There's an armor workstation here, but we hear the voice of a trapper.
That's the fog. Always playing tricks.
We see that they've built a shack at the top of the lighthouse, and through the cracks of the floorboards, we see someone moving. Crawling upstairs, we find him.
Wrong place
Douglas. This must be the boss of the trappers. After killing him, we find a mysterious holotape on his corpse. Listening to it in our Pip-Boy.
Well, that settles it. I am 100% screwed. Damn this fog. You'd think a lighthouse would be easy to find, but not in this. Never seen fog like it. Can't believe I let myself get talked into this. How do I know that woman wasn't crazy? I'm starting to think her whole story was some fantasy she cooked up to get attention. Taking out one trapper to avenge her husband's death. Sounded easy enough. Now I wish I'd stayed far away from this godforsaken island. Shit, something's coming.
So we're not the first person Cassie has sent here to avenge her husband. Nearby, we find a copy of Islander's Almanac. You've collected an issue of Islander's Almanac, Precision Hunting. You have a 5% higher VATS chance against animals you are in combat with. There are 5 copies of Islander's Almanac that we find scattered all over the island. I'll be sure to cover each and every one as we find them. So the man on the holotape had begun to think that Cassie was just making up the story for attention. Would she really send a man to his death like this? And perhaps now we begin to understand why she had the other tasks for us. Perhaps she wanted to make sure that whomever she sent to the lighthouse was ready. We find a number of containers here. Footlockers, ammo canisters. And on a side table next to a Brahmin skull, we find Douglas's note. Caught some of my boys trying to steal some of the loot we took off of that trader. Had to put a bullet in him to show the others. Just in the leg for now. Put all of the stuff in a trunk and dropped it in one of the fishing nets. I'll hang on to the key for, and it's torn here, something they get any ideas. So, he's hidden a treasure chest in one of the fishing nets. We didn't find a key on his body. Let's see if we can find it in here. Inside the light room, we find an end-of-dungeon steamer trunk with caps and ammunition inside, but no key. But then we see it. In the nearby bathtub where Douglas took his baths, we find Douglas's key. Now to find the treasure. Moving south, we see that the trappers have created an elevator out of a rowboat. We can take it down. And when we reach the ground, we find another trapper. We come under fire from trappers down by the shore. We hear a turret, and nearby we find a terminal. It's locked with an advanced lock, but after hacking it, we find an option to deactivate the turret. Moving out, we can jump down and take care of this last trapper. With that, Brookes Head Lighthouse is clear. Heading back up the stairs, we see that turret. No need to destroy it now. Back on the shore, we find a number of walkways and a ruined boat. On the ruined boat, we find an explosives box and an ammo box. And on the walkways, we see some destroyed floating robot bits caught up in nets. These must be the nets we read about in Douglas's note. Hopping out of our power armor, we can dive on in, and sure enough, at the very bottom, we find a trunk that we can unlock with Douglas's key. Inside, we find a tidy stash of ammunition, explosives, and chems. Nearby, we see a tiny little island with some trees growing out of it. Hopping on over, we find the remains of an outhouse and another steamer trunk filled with even more ammunition. With that, we have explored and cleared Brookes Head Lighthouse. Heading back to Far Harbor, we can tell Cassie that her husband has been avenged.
That trapper who killed your husband is dead.
And it's done. It's finally done. All those lives that were lost, all those debts finally repaid. And it was no son or daughter of Far Harbor who stood up to the island and avenged the Dalton bloodline. It was you, an outsider, a mainlander. The final chapter's been written. The story has come to an end. This is a day I never thought I'd live to see. Thank you.
I found a holotape from the last guy you sent to the lighthouse. He thought your whole story was a lie. Is it?
A lie? No. It was true. Or at least there was truth in it. Was there a little harmless exaggeration as well? Perhaps. But some things are more important than truth. Look at you, for instance. You've seen the island's dangers and survived. You've learned something valuable. What's more, the island learned something too. It knows you're not some greenback mainlander who can't tell up from down in the fog. The island will respect you now. And that's more than I can say for most who step off the boat.
I'm less interested in your family revenge story than I am in getting paid.
I see. Well, you're a stranger to our island. Can't expect you to really understand what's important here.
I'm just glad it's over. If I'd kept going, there wouldn't be anything left alive on this island.
I have no cause to doubt you.
I was glad to help. I hope I've put your mind at ease.
You certainly have. Now, every good story's gotta have a happy ending, right? The hero finds the treasure, saves the sweetheart, and rides off into the sunset. Well, I'm a little old to leap up on a horse. But I have got something close to a treasure. This is an heirloom that's been in my family for... let me think. For at least a generation or two. There's no Daltons left to inherit the thing, so it might as well pass on to you. The island knows this weapon. Oh, yes. You carry this, and it'll take you seriously. And that's it. That's the end. I can sleep easy now, knowing there won't be any unfinished business when they put me in the ground. Off you go now. My story's over, but yours, I think yours is only just getting interesting.
With that, we complete the quest Blood Tide, and we get the Blood Letter, a legendary pole hook. Targets bleed for 25 points of additional damage. As I said when I covered the pole hook in my last episode, the pole hook is one of the best melee weapons in the game, more powerful than a sledgehammer. This one, however, has far less damage per attack than the fish catcher that we found on Alan Lee's inventory in our last episode. It only has a base damage of 30, which is less than the base damage of a regular pole hook. This is, of course, offset by the Blood Letter's bleed damage, since bleed damage does stack. In longer melee engagements, this can become a devastating weapon. And the Bloodletter has all of the same upgrades as the pole hook, which is just one, the puncturing upgrade, which adds armor piercing and increases its damage by 15. So the Bloodletter is a pretty good weapon, a viable candidate for an endgame weapon. And that is the legend of the Dalton family. But there are even more characters to meet in Far Harbor who need our help. We'll pick up the story right here where we leave off in our next episode. I publish new Fallout content each and every week on my channel, so if you don't want to miss it, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. If you have already and you still feel like you're missing out on YouTube notifications, consider following me on Twitter at Oxhorn. I update Twitter manually with every new piece of content that I publish. I've got a brand new shirt in the shop. Things live in the fog. Celebrate the survivors of the fog with this brand new design that comes on shirts in a variety of men's, women's, and children's sizes and in a wide array of colors. You can also find this design on other products as well, like smartphone cases, pillows, posters, mugs, stickers, prints, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming a member here on YouTube or a patron on Patreon. YouTube members and patrons are becoming ever more important as YouTube makes changes to their platform and video monetization has an uncertain future. So to the members and patrons who support me, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. You make these videos possible. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with more brand new videos.
Take a look.
Let's do it.